Imagine raising over $300 million for a single construction project.
Right, which is a massive budget.
Oh, absolutely. But you aren't building, a sprawling airport or some towering skyscraper. You are paying an army of engineers to meticulously slice up a 3,000-year-old ancient Egyptian temple.
Literally carving it into massive stone blocks.
Exactly. You're loading those blocks onto trucks, and you are physically rebuilding an entire mountain on higher ground, like piece by piece.
It's wild to even think about.
It is. I mean, that is the extreme, almost incomprehensible length humanity will go to just to save a pile of stones.
Yeah, and when you put it in those terms, it honestly sounds like science fiction.
Oh, for sure.
But that colossal engineering feat was a very real crisis response. And it's actually the exact catalyst for why we now have those sleek, recognizable UNESCO World Heritage plaques sitting outside famous landmarks all over the globe.
Right. Which brings us to what we're doing today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are taking a close look at a massive, comprehensive Wikipedia article on the World Heritage Site designation.
There is so much to unpack here.
So much. Our mission today is to map out the mechanics of this system, how a location actually secures that golden ticket, and the incredibly intense behind-the-scenes controversies that you, the public, rarely ever see.
Because, yeah, that little plaque, it carries a lot of heady geopolitical baggage.
It really does. So if you've ever visited a famous historical landmark or a breathtaking national park and noticed that prestigious UNESCO plaque, well, the story behind it involves international crowdfunding, intense diplomatic lobbying, and even the occasional revoking of the title.
Yeah, taking the trophy back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But to understand the friction happening today, we kind of have to go back to the 1950s and that multi-million-dollar temple relocation we mentioned.
Right, because to understand what a World Heritage Site is today, you have to realize the entire concept didn't even exist as a permanent legal framework back then.
It wasn't a thing yet.
No, not at all. It was born out of a localized but catastrophic emergency. So in 1954, the Egyptian government finalized plans to construct the Aswan High Dam across the Nile.
And I mean, from an infrastructure standpoint, this is just a classic modernization move, right?
Oh, yeah.
A nation needs to control annual flooding. They want to generate massive amounts of hydroelectric power for a growing population.
Mm-hmm.
And, they need a vast reservoir.
Well, the problem was the geography of that new reservoir.
Right.
The resulting lake was going to completely inundate a massive stretch of the Nile Valley. And this specific area wasn't just, empty desert.
Not even close.
No. It contained absolutely priceless cultural treasures from ancient Egypt and ancient Nubia. We're talking about entire temple complexes like Abu Simbel and Philae.
Places that had survived for millennia.
Exactly. They had survived the rise and fall of empires, and suddenly they were facing the prospect of being drowned under millions of gallons of water.
And the global response to this impending doom is just staggering. By 1960, UNESCO launches this massive international campaign to save the monuments.
Yeah, the international campaign to save the monuments of Nubia.
Right. And they don't just ask Egypt to, build a wall around these places. They initiate this globe-spanning operation to literally cut the monuments out of the bedrock and move them.
And the sheer logistics of that are still mind-boggling today.
I can't even imagine.
I mean, they were surveying hundreds of archaeological sites under a ticking clock, recovering thousands of objects, and physically moving mountains of carved stone.
Wow.
And the budget for this rescue mission, it was $80 million at the time.
Okay, let's put that in perspective because the source breaks that down for us. Adjusted for inflation, that is over $312 million in 2025.
It's massive.
A staggering amount of money for a cultural preservation project. And Egypt, they simply couldn't cover that bill alone.
No, they needed help. 50 different countries chipped in.
50?
Yeah, 50 nations contributed to the fund, and they covered about half of that massive cost.
It's kind of like an enormous international crowdfunding campaign, right?
Yeah.
But operating decades before the internet was even a thing.
That's a great way to put it.
It proved that humanity could actually unite simply to save our shared history. The underlying philosophy was just, groundbreaking. We collectively said, this isn't merely Egyptian history, this is human history.
Exactly. And Egypt really recognized the magnitude of that gesture. So to say thank you to the countries that helped the most, the Egyptian government actually dismantled and donated 4 entire ancient temples.
We just gave them away.
Yep. The Temple of Dender, for example, was packed up and shipped to the United States. It actually sits today inside the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City.
Oh, wow, I've seen that.
Yeah. And Madrid received the Temple of Dibod, just as another example.
So we had this incredible origin story. A desperate race against the water proves that the international community can pool resources and save our history.
And that massive success proved the concept actually worked.
Right, which leads directly to the 1972 World Heritage Convention. They took that localized rescue mission and turned it into permanent international law.
A law that is now one of the most universally recognized international agreements in human history. It's been ratified by 196 states.
But over the decades, that really beautiful unified effort has morphed into this highly complex and honestly sometimes bureaucratic machine.
Heavily bureaucratic.
So how does a site actually get that golden ticket today? Because looking at our materials, as of July 2025, there are 1,248 sites.
Across 170 countries.
Right. So honestly, if you hand out over 1,000 gold medals, the gold starts to look a little like brass, you know? Is the list getting bloated? I mean, doesn't spreading the attention across 1,200 locations dilute the actual meaning of the plaque? Is this just a global beauty contest now?
I get why you'd ask that, but if the plaque were just a shiny tourism award, yes, it would be heavily diluted. But we have to look at the mechanics of what the designation actually triggers legally.
Okay.
The rigorous legal protections and the practical conservation efforts tied to a World Heritage Site are very real. When a location is inscribed, it becomes a demarcated, protected zone under an international treaty.
So it's legally binding.
Exactly. It gains these formidable legal shields against uncontrolled commercial development, local administrative negligence, and trespassing.
Okay, so it really isn't a beauty contest. It's a hard international legal boundary.
And getting inside that boundary is a grueling gauntlet.
Yeah.
A country cannot just, nominate a beautiful mountain or a historic downtown on a whim.
They can't just send an email.
No, definitely not. First, the national government has to comprehensively identify its significant sites and place them on a holding document called the tentative list.
So they have to sit in the waiting room.
A very, very long waiting room. And once they're finally ready to proceed, the country has to build a nomination file.
Which I'm guessing is a lot of paperwork.
It is a massive, highly technical dossier. It's not just a brochure with nice photos. It has to prove the site has adequate legal protection already and a long-term management plan.
Right.
And then international advisory bodies, like the International Council on Monuments and Sites, they heavily scrutinize these files.
And then it gets passed up the chain to the World Heritage Committee.
Yes.
Which seems to be where the bottleneck happens and where you can kind of see the politics entering the room.
Oh, big time.
Because this committee is composed of just 21 elected states.
Yeah.
So you have 21 countries holding the keys to a kingdom of 170 nations.
And those 21 diplomatic representatives, they judge the site against a strict set of 10 criteria.
10 of them.
Yeah. To be inscribed, a site has to possess what UNESCO calls outstanding universal value, and it has to meet at least one of those 10 benchmarks.
And the criteria from the source are incredibly sweeping. Like, for cultural sites, it ranges from representing a masterpiece of human creative genius to being an outstanding example of a traditional human settlement.
Right. And for natural sites, it's stuff like containing superlative natural phenomena or representing major stages of Earth's history.
So when you view the 1,200 sites through that specific lens, you aren't really seeing a bloated list.
No, you're looking at a highly vetted, fiercely negotiated catalog of humanity's most vital assets.
Okay. But if getting on the list requires clearing so many hurdles to prove a site's eternal value, what happens when a country fails to protect that value?
Well, that leads us to the danger list.
Right, because history isn't static. What happens when a modern city suddenly decides a new highway is more valuable than its 500-year-old skyline? Does UNESCO ever actually step in and repossess the trophy?
They do, though it is basically the nuclear option of the conservation world.
The nuclear option.
Yeah. Before a site loses its status completely, it's usually placed on the list of World Heritage in danger.
Okay, this happens when the very characteristics that earned the site its plaque are under severe threat. And the threats we are seeing today are just relentless. War, natural disasters, rampant pollution.
But the biggest threat is us, right? Uncontrolled urbanization.
Absolutely.
The numbers in the Wikipedia article show that 63% of natural World Heritage sites have been actively damaged by increasing human pressures. We are talking about encroaching road networks and agricultural infrastructure just squeezing these protected zones.
It highlights this massive structural tension. The global population is expanding, economies demand growth, and all that urbanization is pushing right up against those invisible boundaries.
Right.
So the danger list acts like a warning siren. It's meant to increase international awareness and force the host country to take action.
But if they ignore the siren, the plaque comes down.
It does.
And I was genuinely shocked to learn that in the entire history of the program, UNESCO has only completely delisted 3 sites ever.
Only 3. Let's look at the mechanics of how a country actually loses this status, because each of these 3 rare instances perfectly illustrates the collision between preservation and modern life.
Yeah, they really do. The first one occurred in 2007 with the Arabian Oryx Sanctuary in Oman.
Okay.
And this wasn't a case of slow environmental decay or accidental mismanagement. The Omani government made a unilateral, voluntary decision to shrink the protected area by 90%.
Wait, they just voluntarily erased the boundary lines themselves.
Pretty much. And because the state actively dismantled the legal protections that justified the inscription in the first place, UNESCO had no choice.
Right. The value was gone.
Exactly. The outstanding universal value was compromised by the state's own hand, so they immediately removed it from the list.
Wow. And then 2 years later, in 2009, we see a much more chaotic fight in Germany with the Dresden-Elbe Valley.
Oh, the bridge controversy.
Yeah. Dresden was put on the danger list because the city had approved plans to build a massive 4-lane bridge, the Waldschleusen Bridge, cutting right through the middle of their historic cultural landscape.
And the internal conflict in Germany over this was fierce. UNESCO issued stark warnings that the bridge would permanently destroy the visual integrity of the valley.
But didn't the city try to stop it?
They did. The Dresden City Council actually attempted to halt the construction to save their UNESCO status. But, a city is a complex legal entity. After a series of referendums and binding court decisions, the bridge construction was legally mandated to go ahead.
Right. The people needed to commute. The courts ruled in favor of infrastructure, so UNESCO revoked the title.
Yep, they pulled the plaque.
And we see the exact same mechanism play out in 2021 with the Liverpool Maritime Mercantile City in the UK.
Another infrastructure clash.
Exactly. The city authorized huge new developments, including a massive new football stadium and the sprawling Liverpool Waters project right on their historic northern docks.
And UNESCO determined this caused the irreversible loss of the site's historical attributes.
So they stripped Liverpool of its status, too. Does the threat of losing the title actually stop modern development? Or do cities eventually just decide that modern infrastructure is more important than a historical label?
Well, these delistings force us to confront a very uncomfortable reality. UNESCO's fundamental mandate is frozen preservation. But cities like Dresden and Liverpool, they aren't museums under glass.
No, they're living, breathing economic engines.
Right. A local government looks at an empty historic dock and sees a billion-dollar stadium that will generate jobs, tax revenue, and civic pride.
So the threat of losing a bronze plaque simply isn't enough to stop the gravitational pull of modern economic development.
No, it's really not. And that economic gravity is the exact mechanism driving the most controversial, darkest aspects of the World Heritage Program today.
Yeah, let's talk about the dark side of the plaque.
We assume the plaque only brings protection, but it actually generates enormous political and social friction.
It creates what the sources call the tourism paradox. I kind of liken it to a specialized form of economic gentrification.
How so?
Well, think about it. It's as if winning Best Picture forces a cool indie movie theater to turn into a corporate multiplex.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. A beautiful, quiet, historic village gets inscribed by UNESCO. Instantly, the gravity of that international label pulls in massive waves of global tourists.
Because everyone wants to see the World Heritage Site.
Exactly. And to cater to those tourists, outside investors swoop in, rents skyrocket. The local bakery that has served the community for 3 generations can no longer afford its lease.
So the bakery is forced out, and it's immediately replaced by like a corporate souvenir shop selling cheap, identical magnets.
Yes, the influx of revenue that the country desperately wanted ends up displacing the original community. The label designed to save the site might be the exact thing that destroys its soul.
Our materials specifically point to places like Casco Viejo in Panama and Hainan in Vietnam, which are actively struggling with this exact issue.
It's sad.
The individuality of the site just gets sanded down. You get the same stylized visitor centers, the same boutique cafes. It's a homogenization process.
And because that tourism revenue is so highly lucrative, securing a spot on the list has become a fiercely competitive, multi-million-dollar industry.
Oh, the lobbying.
The lobbying.
Yeah.
A massive lobbying apparatus has grown around these inscriptions, which, frankly, completely warps the playing field.
It really does, because the process of building those nomination files we talked about earlier, it is incredibly costly.
Right. You have to hire international consultants, draft thousands of pages of management plans.
Conduct diplomatic outreach. Poorer nations simply cannot afford the entry fee to the club. Our sources highlight Eritrea's immense struggle to promote its capital, Asmara.
They had the historical value.
They absolutely did, but they lacked the sheer financial capital required to navigate the bureaucratic lobbying process.
And that lobbying power becomes even more visible when a highly lucrative site is threatened with the in danger label.
Oh, definitely.
The situation surrounding the Great Barrier Reef in Australia illustrates the mechanics of this clash perfectly. And I want to just report the facts here impartially, because it's a stark example of science versus diplomacy.
It's a very clear timeline.
Yeah. According to the source, in 2016 and again in 2021, international scientific bodies formally recommended to UNESCO that the Great Barrier Reef be placed on the endangered list.
Because of climate change.
Right. Their data showed that global climate change had caused severe deterioration in the coral networks and overall water quality.
So a purely scientific evaluation demanded the in danger designation.
But the Australian government recognized that slapping an at-risk label on one of their premier natural wonders could devastate their tourism revenue.
So their response was massive diplomatic mobilization.
Right. The materials detail how the government spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a targeted lobbying campaign. They dispatched diplomats to directly engage with the representatives of those 21 countries that sit on the committee.
Because the mechanism of decision-making at UNESCO is ultimately political, not strictly scientific.
Exactly. And in July 2021, the World Heritage Committee chose to overrule the scientists' recommendation. They voted against placing the Great Barrier Reef on the in danger list,
which led to environmental protection groups widely criticizing the vote. They called it a clear demonstration of diplomatic lobbying overpowering environmental science.
It really reveals the intense vulnerability of the system. A country is willing to flex immense diplomatic muscle and capital just to keep a negative label off a tourist attraction.
But, you know, the structural criticisms of UNESCO go even deeper than just lobbying.
Oh, the bias.
Yeah, the entire map of World Heritage is heavily skewed by geographic and racial bias. The criticisms regarding Eurocentrism in the inscription process are stark when you look at the raw data.
Let's look at the data, because a massive chunk of all inscribed sites are located in regions whose populations generally have lighter skin.
Specifically across Europe and North America.
Right. Out of the 1,248 sites globally, Europe and North America hold nearly 46.5% of them.
Almost half.
That is 580 sites concentrated in just a fraction of the globe. Italy alone holds 60 sites.
Wow.
Meanwhile, the entire continent of Africa, literally the cradle of humanity, holds only 112. The historical imbalance is quite literally baked into the system's current architecture.
And that systemic imbalance causes profound friction on the local level as well.
Yeah, let's talk about what the anthropologist Jasper Chalcraft notes in the article.
Right. Chalcraft offers this really critical observation. Making a site World Heritage often completely ignores how local indigenous populations actually interact with it today.
This is the concept of local alienation, and the mechanism behind it is honestly heartbreaking.
It really is.
National authorities want the prestige of the UNESCO plaque. To get it, they have to prove to the International Committee that the site is protected.
So they draw a hard legal line around an ancient space and declare, this belongs to the world now.
Yes, but to enforce that protection, they lock out the locals who actually use it, the communities who have lived alongside that site for centuries.
Chalcraft highlights a devastating example of this in Libya, involving the ancient rock art at the Tadjert Akakis site.
What happened there?
Well, to comply with the rigid protection metrics demanded by UNESCO, national authorities heavily restricted access to the landscape. They effectively severed the local population's connection to the area without any meaningful consultation.
And the blowback was catastrophic, wasn't it?
It was. Locals were furious at being forcibly alienated from their own ancestral heritage by national authorities catering to UNESCO rules. So they protested in the most drastic way possible.
By destroying it.
Yeah, they intentionally vandalized some of the ancient rock art.
It is a staggering, bitter irony. The rigid legal framework designed entirely to protect the heritage was the exact catalyst that provoked its destruction.
It forces us to ask who this heritage is actually being preserved for. Is it for the people who live in its shadow, or is it for an international tourist who drops in for an afternoon?
That's the real question. From the flooded valleys of the Aswan Dam, to the diplomatic clashes over the Great Barrier Reef, to the tragic vandalism in Libya, we are looking at a continuous, evolving struggle.
A struggle over who owns history, who profits from its display, and who gets to dictate its future.
Exactly. We started this deep dive looking at a beautiful, unified effort in the 1960s to save Egyptian temples from rising floodwaters.
And we've seen how that singular moment of international solidarity grew into an incredibly complex, heavily burdened geopolitical machine.
The paradox of the World Heritage System is inescapable. I mean, it provides unparalleled legal armor, massive international recognition, and emergency funding.
Funding that has undeniably saved irreplaceable cultural and natural sites from total erasure.
But that armor is heavy. It brings the crushing weight of mass tourism that can hollow out a living community.
It relies on a hyper-expensive lobbying process that shuts out poorer nations.
And it desperately attempts to freeze dynamic, ever-changing landscapes in a state of permanent amber, frequently alienating the very people who call those landscapes home.
But the materials we reviewed present a fascinating counter-perspective to this idea of frozen preservation.
Oh, the cultural landscape.
Exactly.
Okay.
They mention this newer concept of cultural landscapes, where the continuous evolving interaction between human beings and their natural environment is actually recognized and protected.
So it acknowledges that heritage isn't just dead stone.
Right. The sources state that heritage is, quote, what we live with today.
And that phrase completely reorients how we look at our own era. We've talked extensively today about how human urbanization and modern infrastructure are considered the greatest threats to heritage sites right now.
Yeah, bridges and stadiums are the enemies of the plaque.
But it makes you wonder how future generations will judge our footprint.
That's an interesting thought.
Think about the massive, sprawling megacities and high-tech stadiums we are building right now. 1,000 years from today, will those structures be viewed as urban blight that needs to be bulldozed to reveal older ruins? Or will they be carefully excavated and fiercely protected by the UNESCO of the future, celebrated as the ultimate World Heritage Sites of the 21st century?
Where exactly does living history end and museum history begin?
Keep that in mind the next time you walk past one of those bronze plaques. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.